Welcome to the City of Rapid City Planning Commission meeting for December 6th, 2018. We have a few housekeeping items. If any member of the audience wishes to speak to an item on the Planning Commission agenda, there are speaker request forms on the table along the left wall. Please fill out the request with the agenda number of the item you wish to speak to and hand it to the staff seated at the left of the dais. At this time, we would like to ask that if any member of the audience has a cell phone or other electronic device, that you turn it off or turn the ringer to silent. If you need to take a call, please step out to the hallway so the meeting is not disrupted. We do not have a Zoning Board of Adjustments meeting today. Do we need to take a vote on that? No. Okay. Items 1 through 3, the consent calendar, have been placed on the consent calendar and may be approved as a group. Action will be taken on all consent items in accordance with staff's recommendation by single vote. Any item may be removed from the consent calendar by any planning commissioner, staff member, or audience member for separate consideration at this time. The findings of the Planning Commission are recommendations to the City Council, and the City Council will make the final decision. Are there any items 1 through 3 that staff would like removed from the consent calendar? No, thank you. Are there any items 1 through 3 that the Planning Commission would like removed from the consent calendar? Are there any items 1 through 3 that any audience member would like removed from the consent calendar? The chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar items 1 through 3 in accordance with staff recommendations. All those who say aye? Nay? Okay, it's unanimous. Now to the regular agenda items.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we could take items 4, 5, and 6 together, please.
Okay.
These 3 items are 2 rezone applications, in part to go from General Ag District to Office Commercial on a 5.2 acre parcel of land, and to go from General Commercial District to Office Commercial on an 8.85 acre of land. And if you combine all that together, you get about 14 acres. There's also an initial plan development for that same parcel that, if the rezoning goes forward, to place this in an Office Commercial District to allow a 4-story apartment development. And with that, I'd like to show you some slides. This is the aerial of the property. It was the previous site of a gold processing facility. That has since been removed. The only thing on the property now is a pole sign that's located up against the service road along Mount Rushmore Road. As you can see, it's located directly north of NAU with Fox Road along the south lot line, and the service road and Mount Rushmore Road to the east. That is a church that's directly north of it, and to the west, you can see from the aerial the rooftops of several single-family homes. The major street plan identifies that Mount Rushmore Road is a principal arterial road. It's also identified as an entrance corridor to the city and to the Black Hills. The service road is identified as a collector street. This is a layout of the apartment development associated with the initial plan development. And let me just back up. I think, here we go. I don't know how we missed that slide. The future land use plan of the property shows in the purple area, the property is identified for employment. Employment identifies Office District as an appropriate zoning designation. Now we can go to this slide. They are proposing a 325 to 350 unit apartment development. It would entail 5 4-story structures, and then the smaller one is a community room with an outdoor swimming area. The Samuelsons have currently built a similar complex just west of the city's fire station, and we've got some pictures of that we'd like to show you so that you can have a look at what they've currently put in our city. As a part of this, they are also doing garages along Mount Rushmore Road, Service Road, and along Fox Road, as well as some along that north lot line and a few also on the west. Our ordinance states that accessory structures cannot be in the front yard, and with that, you'll notice one of the stipulations of approval require that the accessory structures be removed from the front yard. There is also a grove of trees that exist. You can see those on the aerial. The area in the very southwest corner is identified as a detention area. We may need to come back to this as we go through further discussions. This is an elevation of the building. The initial plan development was submitted, noting that in order to get the density that was needed for the development and preserve the open space for the site, they are proposing 4-story structures similar to what they have currently just west of the fire station. This is the front elevation. The height in office commercial that's allowed is 35 feet. What they are proposing is 48.4 feet. I would like to note that the portion of the property that's currently zoned general commercial does right now allow for a 45-foot high structure. However, when you rezone to office commercial, which is your less dense commercial uses and high density residential uses, then that maximum height is 35 feet. Looking at one of the side elevations. These are photo simulations that they provided. This is from the service road looking southwest into the site. This simulation doesn't show the garages. Looking across Mount Rushmore Road, you can see the service road, and then there are rooftops of the garages, and that's the look that we wouldn't want to have bordering the Mount Rushmore Road corridor, is the backside of garages and the slanted roofs. This is looking from the southwest corner of the property, and they tried to show the preservation of the trees on the site. Ken and John joined me, and we took a tour of the property as well as the area, so I'm going to kind of walk you through what we did. We are in the parking lot of the church to the north of the site, looking south into it. You can kind of see the elevation, and in the background you can see a little bit of the NAU and some of the residential off to the southwest. From the service road looking straight south, this is looking back onto the church site. The steeple that's there is about 3 stories tall, so the development on this site would be about 1 story taller than that steeple. This is looking southeast across Mount Rushmore Road. There is a 3-story assisted living facility. That ground floor elevation is a little bit lower than this site. And this is looking down Mount Rushmore Road to the north back to the city. You can see the water tower in the background. Looking south, again capturing the Mount Rushmore Road. Looking into the site, showing that the signs were posted as required. You can kind of see some of the trees in the background. This is at the corner of the Service Road and Fox Road, looking into the site. This is looking back north on the Service Road. And you can see the sign that still exists from the previous business. Looking at the NAU property and Fox Road. This is at the western terminus of Fox Road, looking back towards the service road. The subject property would be on the left with NAU on the right. And then turning around and looking the other way, at that intersection, you'll see a private drive extending straight forward, another private drive to the right, and then Berglund Road going to the left that goes to the Squirrely Acres subdivision, which all entails some single-family development. This is, you can see that private drive along the west lot line of the property and some of the trees that are on the site. This is looking more along the Berglund Road, and in the background you can see the existing Copper Ridge apartments that were developed by this same developer. We went over to that site to get a picture of the existing garages that were allowed along that perimeter. Since it is a more remote area, the city owns the adjacent land, and it fit well with their design plan. So in that case, an exception was granted However, it's not bordered by any arterial streets within this area. We drove down to the intersection of Catron Boulevard and Mount Rushmore Road to take a look at the Black Hills Energy site. When that property was developed, an exception was granted to allow a 70-foot high building. However, the ground floor elevation is significantly lower on that site. And as we traveled up on the service road south of that intersection, we captured the roof line. This is the existing Samuelson property, and this is the Black Hills Energy building. Just to show that that skyline is fairly consistent with that development that was allowed just west of the fire station. This one is a little harder to see. When we look down Mount Rushmore Road, in the distance, you can see the steeple of the church, which is right here, and I'll clear that up. And then those buildings would be about 1 story taller than that steeple. We have a development for apartments that are approved out at Moon Meadows and Mount Rushmore Road. It's known as the Meadows. These are 3-story structures. It did have a height exception to go to 40 feet because of the elevated ceilings in that top level. And as you can see, it sits back from Mount Rushmore Road a significant distance. And that distance is about 480 feet. We drove over along Catron Boulevard to show you the existing development and then took a little closer look. And as you can see, they're very attractive apartments. The 4-story height is, we tried to capture that in this photo, and we're over on Vine Cliff, just off of Catron Boulevard. And as we circled back around, trying to get on the other side of Mount Rushmore Road, those 2 pine trees where the signs were posted, just to show you the horizon. And unfortunately, the picture is a little bit dark. The sun goes down quick these days. In the past, you have had several apartment developments before you that you've had to look at some exceptions for one reason or another. As we look at the Copper Ridge development, which is this one, they did get the height exception that they're requesting today, but as you can see, it sits back from Mount Rushmore Road a distance of 700 feet, and then it's about 1,100 feet from Catron Boulevard, another arterial street. Meadows Apartments, as we just talked about, was 160 units. It sits back 480 feet, and they did get a height exception to 40 feet. The Black Hills Energy, again, sits at a ground floor elevation significantly lower, so that 70-foot elevation pretty much parallels with the Copper Ridge development, and it does sit back 1 lot from Mount Rushmore Road. Eagle Ridge was one of the first apartment developments in the area. It's all 3-story. There were no exceptions, and in that case, because of the residential component so close, it was required to put a privacy fence along the west lot line and to put bermed landscaping along Catron Boulevard. More recently, you approved an apartment development for Letners. It included 304 units, 4-story, and it was approved with an initial plan development with the requirement that the ground floor elevation be lowered 16 feet and that landscaping be provided along the south and west lot lines to further buffer it from the arterial streets of Mount Rushmore Road and Catron Boulevard. And of course, this is the subject property that we're talking about today. So as we look at this, we first have to analyze whether or not the zoning is appropriate for the site. As I mentioned, the future land use plan does identify it as an employment area. Office commercial is appropriate for an employment designation. There has been some concern about changing this from general commercial to office commercial because of that residential component. That's something that as we go forward and look at the scope and density of the project, we're going to lay upon you, Planning Commission, to listen to all the discussion that'll be brought forward this morning to see whether or not it is appropriate to put an apartment development of 325 to 350 units with the design schematics as proposed. As you noted in the project report that John wrote, and I think he did a very good job, he's identified several of the concerns that I think the letters that were submitted also identified, and we've tried to remediate that through the stipulations. One of them being traffic. This would generate a significant amount of traffic. The service road and even the connections to Mount Rushmore Road may require improvements at some juncture to accommodate the traffic. The initial plan development is being proposed just to see whether or not this works for the Samuelsons. Having to hire that traffic impact study is a significant cost. It is required as a part of a final plan development, similar to what you did for Letner's and even for the Meadows Apartments. That comes in with the final plan development. The stipulation in the report notes that the traffic impact study must be submitted with the final, and any improvements that are required would have to come forward as a part of that construction of that project and be in place and completed prior to a certificate of occupancy. As we look at the design of the facility, and this is where we're going to go back to the, sorry guys, I just really wanted to capture the neighborhood and take you on tour with us, so I apologize for the number of outdoor graphics. Here we go. So looking at that height, in order to remediate it, what we've done in the past, and we have seen an impact from it, it would be to require berm landscaping along Fox Road and Mount Rushmore Road, eliminate the garages from the front setbacks, and then increase that setback to the apartments so that we didn't have them looming over that service road. In addition, for every unit that's proposed, there needs to be 400 square feet of open, usable space provided on site. If any of you have been out there, you'll note that over the years, the employees of this area and many of the residents like to walk. There are no sidewalks in this area, so many of them walk down that service road. One of the concerns that we had is with this number of occupants to this facility, we again would have folks that want to have that outdoor activity. So it's important that what is designed on site allows them to have that outdoor recreational area so that we reduce to the greatest extent possible pedestrians, again, along Fox Road and the service road. Please note that as a part of a building permit for this site, the applicant would be required to put sidewalk along the perimeter of the property as it abuts right-of-way. I'd also like to note that in previous platting in this area, it was required that improvements be made along Fox Road. Surety was posted, the improvements were never made. The city still has that surety. To date, that surety would not cover the cost of improving that street. There's ongoing discussions with city staff about when that requirement is needed, the city's contribution to matching that windfall or covering that windfall of or shortfall of the cost of improving that street. So that will be a discussion regardless of what development occurs on this property that the city is aware of, and we will go forward with that discussion. As I previously noted, there was also a gold processing facility on this site. There have been comments made about contamination of the soils. If it is identified that the soils are contaminated, as so many properties here in the city we find do have contaminated soils, the remediation of that would have to take part as the site developed, so that would come forward as a part of a building permit. In ensuring that I haven't missed any of our stipulations, the west lot line is a section line highway. Any development within that area has to maintain a 58-foot setback to the section line highway. I think that pretty much covers those issues that may significantly change the layout. At some point, if it's the desire of the Planning Commission to not grant the exception to the height, then the applicant would either maintain a similar design and lose units, or they would put in another building, which then would potentially remove some of the trees. However, the requirement for the 400 square foot per unit may also limit the number of units that they could provide on site, plus the amount of parking. The 350 units would require 525 parking spaces. So sometimes the maximum number of units that are allowed needs to be determined once you've secured the open space and the parking. Then you see how much real estate you have left to actually put a footprint of a building. When we've looked at this and looked at the future land use plan, it may be appropriate that apartments be allowed at this site. The concern that we had is the scope and density of the use. It doesn't seem to be in character with what's in the neighborhood. Other than the 3-story assisted living facility, there aren't any other 3-story structures or 4-story structures within this area. However, the Office Commercial District does support 3-story structures, and so certainly with careful design and with the layout of the site to accommodate the pedestrian activity that needs to be secured, as well as the parking, something may very well work. We would like for you to listen carefully to the neighborhood and to the applicant. If this site were to develop as zoned currently, the eastern 75% is currently general commercial. There could be a 45-foot structure built, maybe a hotel with recreational activities outside that may have an impact on this neighborhood. However, the use is different. Is it appropriate to have residential right up against Mount Rushmore Road? Would you prefer to see commercial? That's something that I want you to listen carefully to today as you make your decision. And please note that the rezone is a recommendation to council, but the initial plan development action is final unless it's appealed to council. So with that, if you have any questions for me, I'd be glad to answer them. Otherwise, I encourage you to take conversation from the audience.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Vicki. I have a number of speaker request forms here. I just want to make it clear that in order for everyone to have an opportunity to speak, it's important that we stay brief. Generally, 3 minutes is the guideline, but we're not going to enforce that today. So, and then the other consideration is that if you hear someone else say something that, that you agree with, instead of getting up and repeating what they've said, just get up and say, you know, I agree with this. But we encourage everyone to speak if they're interested in speaking on an issue. And if you haven't filled out a speaker request form, it's over there by the pink note, and then you can turn it into staff. So the first one I have, I'm taking all of the items together, 4, 5, and 6, is Mary Casey. If you could please come up to the dais and state your name and address.
My name's Mary Casey. I live at 2050 Fox Road, right at the end of Fox Road. And I'm going to wait to maybe comment after some of the other gentlemen have spoken. Okay.
Okay, next we have Bob Rosenquist.
Good morning. What I'd like to speak on is the density of this project in our area. We live at 5151 Berglund Road. It'd be on the west border of the current project. About the density, just how many people would join our neighborhood if this is built. They propose 350 units on this 14 acres, which probably they can't get 14 acres because of the terrain. There'd be 700 people that would live in this unit. If you go to Hill City, which population is currently the same as that 700, give or take a few, and that's located on 640 acres. And if we go a little further down the road, 0.4 of a mile to the Copper Ridge, that is the same unit that they're proposing to build in this location. Combining those two would make the population of Custer, South Dakota, in this small area. Just to sum it up, it's too many people for too small an area and too close to private neighborhoods. And we're kind of worried about security and privacy. So we'd appreciate your vote against this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Robert Durst.
Good morning. I am Robert Durst, and me and my wife Rebecca lived at 5353 Berglund Road, which is just around the corner on the private road from the proposed site. I'm going to speak specifically to the meeting that we had with the Samuelson Development Company just as recently as this last Monday night. Part of this proposal had been on the agenda for the November 8th meeting of this group and was postponed so that they could conduct a educational, informative meeting with us, which was held on Monday night. We had a good turnout. I think there were at least 16 interested parties from our side, and he had his group of support staff there. And Samuelson Sr. Presented a very nice presentation. It was our first chance to get a look at the layout of the proposed plan development, and there was a fairly vigorous give and take discussion for, I would say, probably half an hour, 45 minutes. We offered some suggestions as to how to maybe lessen the density, lessen the impact on the surrounding neighborhood from his project. And they listened, and I think it was a cordial discussion. But at the end, a couple members of our group asked him if he heard anything that made an impact on his decision-making. Was he willing to compromise or make any adjustments to his plan? And his answer was no. He was going to stick with his plan no matter what, and any deviation from that was going to make it a problem for him to continue with his project. That was disappointing to us because we thought we had presented some alternatives, and again, we were disappointed in that. I attended this meeting, not this meeting, but a similar meeting a month ago when this first was proposed. And I was encouraged by the discussion that you held in regards to a request for variance up on Skyline Ranch Road, which is going to be on the agenda. You used terms like these projects need to be in keeping with the existing structures, in keeping with the character of the neighborhood, and should not be injurious to the neighborhood. We view this project as being significantly injurious to the existing neighborhood, and we would respectfully ask for you to vote against the proposals. One more thing, during the discussion with the Samuelsons, they indicated that the life expectancy of this project would be in the range of 100 years. So that the decisions that we make here this morning are going to impact our neighborhood, our community, and the entire Black Hills for quite some time to come. So I would respectfully ask that you keep that in mind in your decision-making as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Durst. Next, we have Becky Durst.
Hi, I'm Becky Durst. I live at 5353 Berglund Road, and I'll just answer any questions later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm going to mispronounce your name. Joseph Sejwar?
My name is Joe Saver. I live at 4600 Skyline Drive.
I'm sorry, could you please speak into the
sorry.
microphone? Thank you.
Joe Saver, 4600 Skyline Drive. I live just adjacent to the Calvary Baptist Church, and you indicated that there's going to be a traffic problem. Well, I can tell you every day there's a traffic problem because traffic is coming from the Lutheran Church across the road, and so I think that that has to be one of the major considerations, I would think, if you add this many more people. So, and I agree with Bob.
Thank you. Next, we have Jeff Bent.
Had to be sure I was at the right mic. I'm Jeff Bent. My wife and I, Jody, live at 5411 Bergland Road, just to the south of this proposed development. I agree with what some of the other people have said in the discussion on density. We're concerned about the density. They're trying to put, or the proposal is on about actually 10 or 11 acres of the 14 acres because of the detention pond, et cetera, there. So it's about 700 people living there. Comparing this to the Copper Ridge development that they told us at the Monday night meeting, this was not, that was on 14 acres. So, but the difference is there's a buffer there. They own 55 acres. If you look to the west and on each side, there's a buffer zone around all of this density. So it doesn't seem to me quite as dense down there. Also for the traffic, this increased density, there's going to be 1 to 3 people per unit. One of the engineers that I worked with when I developed part of Catron Boulevard down by Sheridan Lake said what you do for when Stony Creek Highland apartments were going in, you take the number of units and take it times 11 for your peak traffic, daily traffic. That would be almost 3,500 to 4,000 cars. People don't just leave at 7 in the morning and come back at 5 and stay home. They're going back and forth to work or other running other errands or going to other places. This is set up right on Rushmore Road, as Vicki Fisher mentioned, compared to 2 to 3 blocks off of Rushmore Road, and there are the 2 schools. The biggest issue I have is the variance as far as the 48-foot high buildings versus the 35-foot buildings, looking at the steeple on the church as you saw on the screen there. This just doesn't, to me, fit in with the overall plan, future land use plan for the gateway to the Black Hills. I understand something's going to go there, but to allow a almost 50-foot high building there, which is going to obstruct the views also of the gateway to the hills, as I say. So I'd appreciate your consideration in this.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Jody Bent. Robert Cruz.
My name is Robert Cruz. I live at 5510 Bergland Road, which is just the southwest of this development. And I completely agree with my neighbors who have expressed, opposition to this project. It just seems to me that it's the wrong project at this particular site. Other projects, overall in the project, I think it could fit in other areas in Rapid City, but on this particular site, it's just the wrong project for that site. And I'll just let my other neighbors continue on our discussion, but we're opposed to it.
Thank you. Tammy Cruz.
Tammy Cruz. I live at 5510 Berglund Road, and I agree with all what my neighbors have been saying, and I oppose this project.
Thank you. Now I have Bob Brandt.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Bob Brandt. I was the general contractor on Phase 2 of Copper Ridge Apartments. And what I'd like the Planning Commission to do is I'd encourage you to look 15, 20 years into the future and envision what this corridor is going to look like. This corridor from the top of the hill all the way to Reptile Gardens is the fastest growing corridor, 2-3 mile stretch in South Dakota, rivaling anything that there is in Sioux Falls. And in 15 or 20 years, it's going to be solid businesses, both sides of the road, all the way out to the Reptile Gardens Hill. Just look at what's happened. There's $250 million of work in the last 2-3 years itself. That's going to continue with Hanny Shaffy's project there at the corner. You've got the rehab center is opening up here this month or next month. And Samuelson's have come up with a very interesting economic model that works economically for them, but it also strikes real well with what the people want. We finished Phase 2 in September of last year, and by February, all 200 units were full, and they had a waiting list. 40% of their clients are retired couples. They're sick of mowing lawns and shoveling snow, and they love the 4-story building. Each building has their own elevator. It's more like a hotel. All your entrance doors are off of an inside corridor through a security door. So, especially older people, young professionals love that. So, again, I'd encourage you to look what's going to happen in that corridor in 15, 20 years, and this project's going to fit in. People want to live close to where they're working. You got the Black Hills Court building there, the rehab, Hanny's new development, and there's going to be a lot more office buildings in that area. And people want to live close to where they're working. So I'd encourage you to vote for this. It's a great economic model. It works well for them, and it works well for Rapid City. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brandt. Next, we have Aaron Christensen.
Good morning. My name is Aaron Christensen. My wife and I are building a house at 5508 Berglund right now. And we are generally opposed to the project, and I won't say much else, but I agree with everything my neighbors are saying. Thank you.
Okay, you guys have all been very brief. Next, we have Mary Casey. Okay, thank you. I have Nancy Jensen.
Okay, I'm Nancy Jensen. Good morning to all of you. Wasn't it fun getting up today? No. Anyway, I live at 5440 Plains Vista Court. That just happens to be right across the highway on the other side of the street, which I still feel like I'm part of the neighborhood, living right off of 16. I am opposed to this also for many reasons, but most of them have been discussed. It was interesting to learn. I just feel like it's going to be a big wall. You're going to come down 16, you're going to go by the churches, and then all of a sudden it's just going to be 4 stories. And I'm like, I can't even visualize it, and even though you showed the pictures. Anyway, this definitely is a big traffic problem, and as far as I can see it. We already have lots of traffic on Highway 16. And most every day, and I'm retired, so I get to come and go at better hours, but many times I'm sitting there on Enchantment Road, and and 16. And of course, we're going to have more development there, more business, or whatever. So this, I think they're going to have some hoops and hurdles to meet any kind of traffic there, because we already have, we need a stoplight at Enchantment Road and Mount Rushmore Road already. We need some stoplights on that whole strip, and I know the traffic department doesn't want to put in stoplights, not stop signs. So I think that's our biggest hurdle, plus it's too tall. It's kind of like, they talk about this footprint, and I equate it to trying to put an elephant in a closet. To me, this is too much, too dense, as we've all talked about. So it will definitely affect the other side of the highway as much as it's affecting the neighbors around it. So I would recommend that you really, really, really look at this seriously before you jump off and say, fine. The other thing that bugs me is that office commercial is a 3-story limit. And why are you making all these exceptions to that 3-story limit? There's, you know, I'm sorry that they can't make this project work without going to 4-story. Plus, actually, all in all, it's going to be 54 feet high. It's not going to be 48 feet high. You guys build these big roofs and put, you know, so you could take a 1-story building and make it almost 2-story with the roofs that you're putting on these buildings today. So just another thought. Anyway, that's all I have to say. I'm not real happy about it, but I'm going to trust in your judgment, and hopefully it'll work out. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen. Next, I have a speaker request form for Jason Bryce.
Good morning. My name is Jason Bryce. I live at 5501 Bergland Road. I, as well, live in the neighborhood, as you can expect most of the speakers today will be. After listening to the comment here this morning, I took notice of the general contractor who talked about the entrance corridor to Rapid City here on the south side, which this piece particularly has impact on. Reviewing the Rapid City Comprehensive Plan for the entrance corridors to the city, which US 16 is included in that list, I found it at the bottom here to say the focus should be protection of scenic views, landscaping, and natural character rather than intense development along entrance corridors. We understand that development will take place along the corridor, but as others have mentioned, the enormity of this project for this particular piece doesn't seem to fit the location of the intended project. When you review the documents that were set forward by the committee here, it's apparent that every single proposed setback has been encroached upon, including the height restriction for the project. That right there sets a red flag in my mind that for this project to work on this property, they need to sprawl as well as climb. The borders of this property, unfortunately, that you've heard, are very close to single-family residents. Single-family residents that have been there for 30-some years plus. Once again, with planned development and future use of the area, things are going to change. The corridor has grown significantly, but in contrast to the other development that they've done farther down the road, there is no single-family residence. It is next to the fire hall, where other businesses along the frontage road are probably about a block or so at least away. When it comes to these types of apartment buildings, they're certainly the future, involved in the future of Rapid City housing. We know that there are issues with housing. Unfortunately, the biggest issue is affordable housing, I think, in this city. These are claimed to be higher-end apartments, which does not necessarily address that. but that's not what we're here about today. The one additional concern that I have is the four-story apartment down at their current four-story apartment at near the fire hall has a setback, like Vicki said, of 700 feet. It's 700 feet west of Mount Rushmore Road. The other development that we talked about today, 304 unit that is not theirs, is located 800 feet east of Mount Rushmore Road. The development that they're proposing is probably somewhere between 150 to 200 feet from Mount Rushmore Road, barely across the service road, and then, as we see, encroaching upon the setbacks. The reason that these other ones, I'm guessing, have been approved is because the setbacks, it said, the setbacks have served to mitigate the impact of the increased heights along these two principal arterial streets. They're talking about Catron, they're talking about Mount Rushmore Road. I can see the use of gigantic structures like this set back away from the primary corridor that we talked about, which the focus should be preserving the views of the scenic Black Hills. And like some of my neighbors have said, you'll be coming down 16, there'll be a vertical wall of almost 50 plus or minus feet, which will entirely kind of crowd into the Rushmore corridor there. I guess with that being said, I think this apartment building could go somewhere in the city. I think it has great use in the city, but I think this particular property, because of the proximity to the road, as well as single-family residents that will be negatively impacted, as well as the beautification of our entire city and maintaining welcoming entrance to the city, I think, should be denied. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Cliff Bienert.
Good morning, Commission, and thank you for, I was a very late request, and thank you for allowing that, Ms. Caesar. And I'm Cliff Bienert, and my wife and I, Deb, we live at 2150 Skyline Ranch Road, so we're not adjacent to this property, but we live in the area and frequent and use the service road and also the access to 16. And as I want to reiterate what's been already stated here, that the density here is the issue. And this service road and the traffic on the service road, congested by two schools, adjacent schools. Nothing's been mentioned about the school at the Baptist church and the school across the road at the Lutheran church. Those schools at that intersection create a tremendous traffic hazard. It's a safety concern. There is going to be a death there because there's so much traffic at the school in and out period of time, as you can well imagine. And it's without incorporating traffic into this up front, it's a mistake because the density is far too great. And there's going to be a travesty at that intersection, which is going to be complicated by 700 more people, roughly. And keep in mind that 350 units, I'm not certain what the zoning ordinance is, but my experience in the past is 1.5 cars per unit. So you're going to add another 500 cars in that area. And you can't predict what time they're going to use, but when you complicate that with the traffic to and from the schools as they're dropping children off, it becomes a very dangerous situation. And personally, we're going to lose what used to be a really nice place to walk, the service road. This is going to become, and it's inevitable. And I don't want to, you know, Rapid City has grown and it's going to continue to grow, so we need to support this. And how do we support it? But we need places for people to live. We understand that. But this isn't the right spot. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Bienert. Next, I have Lawrence Kostaneski. Ski.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Lawrence Kostaneski with Centerline. I'm helping Samuelson's with their civil engineering work. There's so many comments wrapped in generalizations. half of which had to do with traffic, the threat to school children, et cetera, et cetera. All of these things are real, but every one of those comments are going to come back no matter what comes in here. Let's say it's some kind of commercial establishment. Well, anybody who has a retail business knows that without traffic you don't have a business. That's how they get to your business. So whether it's this project or some other project, the issue of traffic on that service road and at Highway 16 isn't going to go away no matter what goes in there. So this is an opportunity with this project to solve it. And it is going to be done up front. I think maybe the last speaker indicated, well, this should be done up front before anything else is done. It is going to be done up front. You heard Vicki say, final development plan does not get approved until the traffic impact study is integrated into the project. As far as density of people, it's inherent in apartment projects. That's what happens. So everyone talks about preserving the vista along Mount Rushmore Road. That can come, to do that, as a practical matter, can come at a very, very steep cost. For example, this project is a $45 million investment. You go a half a mile to the south, the project that's going on across from Black Hills Energy will dwarf this one in economic impact. Now, people who are willing to make that kind of investment and that kind of commitment, they don't do it to harm the neighbors in any way. They're meeting a need. Okay? They're not going out here proposing this without having carefully studied, as have their underwriters and lenders, studied the need for this apartment type. They've already got one that's a huge success. They're watching the demand, and they decided to put one here. Now, those of you who have been planning commissioners for a while realize that people will oppose particularly significant development, not kind of small things they won't necessarily, but significant development, they'll oppose it no matter what it is because it impacts them where they live. They know that. But we don't always make our decisions based on that. We try to mitigate as best we can the impact from any particular development, including this one. All of these things that have been raised today will be dealt with. You have to remember, this is initial development plan. Nothing gets built until you folks approve the final development plan. All the details are brought forward then. So I think it's only fair, personally, to allow this project to proceed through initial development plan. And if it's not going to get through final development, then it won't. And you will get to see that up close and personal. So I would ask you to approve this, because no dirt will be turned with the approval of this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Chris Long.
I'm Chris Long with KW Commercial Real Estate. I'm working on behalf of Samuelson Development. Just want to touch on a couple of things kind of on a broader level with the zoning in that area up there. You know, as we talked about already, this does fit into the future land use. But there's a unique piece to that, and as that continues to develop out as an employment sector and as a general commercial sector in some points, you have to look at that stretch and see what fits best into each section of that road. Traditionally, with traditional zoning, we always see a medium density buffer or some type of buffer between a residential component and a general commercial component or a high traffic component. This is providing that buffer. We're sitting with two schools on both sides of the property. I don't think we want a general commercial use sitting between two schools. Do we want additional residential sitting between two schools and providing that buffer to these homeowners? with Highway 16. I think that's a, a point that needs to be looked at. Also, just fitting into the community need as this develops out as an employment sector, and we work as a city to bring up our wages and have higher accommodations for bringing additional people to town, bringing additional companies to town. They've done extensive work to find out what the demand for their type of Class A apartment community is, and it's extreme. And if we're trying to move community or businesses to town, and they're going to be up in that area developing, bringing medical, bringing profession up there, they need a place to live, and this is a good solution to provide that. The other thing I just want to caution you with is to steer away from the not in my backyard thoughts behind the development. In our meeting, there was support for the project, the need for the project up on Highway 16, up in that area. It was just expressed that they don't want it on that piece of property. I think that piece of property is right because it fits, gives the buffer, fits into the future land use, and will meet a need of a lot of community members. So I ask for your support.
Thank you. Next, we have John Samuelson, Jr.
Thank you. First, I guess I kind of want to, since it's been stated, our Copper Ridge project, I kind of want to first talk a little bit about that. You know, when we first came to town, we did do a traffic study, and just the same requirements as what we're doing, looking at here, and we'll do that on this property since that's kind of been a big topic. And that property only has really one way in and out, and there was no recommendations of improvement. This one here, it does have multiple locations. You know, go east or north and south and access points. So we anticipate it to be okay, but we are going to do a traffic study, as it's been stated. The other thing was the four-story buildings. All of our buildings have elevators in them. Can I get my water right there? And by allowing that, to our understanding, to our research and everything, is that we're the only apartment complex that all units are ADA accessible. So pretty much that's a large chunk of what makes us very much different. Most three-story apartments, the one Moon Meadows down the road, you know, Pines, Gateway, all those don't have elevators in them, and they're only accessible on the first floor. And so that is why a big portion of our retirees live into our project. So that was kind of, you know, that's a big reason why we do four-story buildings. The other reason was, as we've, you can see that we kind of lessen our footprint. And I know it's been stated, but it does limit the number of building or impact on that land. And on this specific lot, we do want to preserve that back, natural preserving to the back with the trees and topography to create a buffer from the residents and the people there. So as we designed this project, it did get a little bit more towards the front of this property. So, and then the other part is that we do anticipate putting in some hiking trails for our residents in that area, kind of in the back area. We'd like to see some natural paths and utilize that topography in that land. So as we kind of, you know, we had the meeting, and you know, as I said, there was some pretty good conversation, got a little heated at times, but as far as recommendations, there weren't any strong ones other than that they just didn't want it in that spot, the density, but there was no idea of what density they would want either. And it is reduced from what could be on there. We actually aren't maximizing the density of this land. And, because there could be up to 400 units of what Vicki has told me before, as long as we meet those other requirements. And there are ways around that, and we haven't explored that. But anyways, so we are actually not fully maximizing the density of this property. The other thing that we were looking at, and we kind of have the garages along the property to kind of help create that buffer. And I know Vicki showed a picture of Copper Ridge garages, and at the time they didn't have it, but it was all those garages were kind of built into the side of the hill. And I'd actually like to show some pictures of a project that we did in Sioux Falls that has garages, and we did some berming and landscaping, and I don't know how well these show up. How do I put these here? So, is this right? So this is one corner, and basically there are garages here, along here, and then all the way along the road. So this is one corner picture. There is apartment building back in the corner there. Here's another picture. This is more in the middle area of it. And this is the other side, looking back the other direction. The reason we couldn't do that, we wanted to do that here, but the big reason was because of the hill that those garages were built into, and if we would have bermed it, basically we would have had water going back into the garages and would have created an issue there. Because before Hanny took out the hill, I mean, we had 2 feet between grade and the roof on the very end of the corner of that property. So with having that there, we were trying to create a buffer between a little bit to reduce the height by, visually as you came down Catron, that there would be kind of a distance. You wouldn't see just a straight wall of apartment building, but that was kind of the reason, a big reason why we put garages. The other reason is there is a great need for garages out here. It's one of the big complaints that people have amongst all properties is that they don't have garages. With hail being out here, people want to put their car under a roof, and so so that's a big part why we wanted to put a little bit more garages on this property than what we had on Copper Ridge. So. The other thing that I do want to also, I guess, talk about a little bit is our demographics of people. We do have, it's about 1.5 person per unit is the average. And of that makeup, we do have a significant amount of doctors and medical people that live there, retirees and military. And then, of course, services as well. And when we started deciding whether to build, again here, we set a criteria for the lot or for the land. And one of the things that we do want is an infill lot that is close to business, close to work, close to where people live and work. And this lot met that criteria. It's the size that we were needing, and we looked at other locations, and just none of them met that requirement that we would like. So, we could look at 3-story buildings, but it would entail more footprints, and then we may not be able to preserve that back area as we desire to do. So I do request that you strongly approve this. And as Skia said, no, it's not the end, that we still have work to do. And I'd like to continue that work. So thank you.
Thank you. So I have no more speaker request items or forums for this item. But I do have some planning commissioners who would like to speak. Vince?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually have a couple of questions from a couple of the speakers. So first of all, thank you for waking up early and joining us here to give us this information that you have. One of my questions is for Mr. Durst, and then another one for Mr. Samuelson, and one for Vicki. Mr. Durst, one of the things that you said to us this morning, and again, I appreciate everyone's brevity as the chair requested. So we really do appreciate that, so we can get to this issue as fast as we can. But we want to make sure, I want to make sure that we're looking at everything we need to look at. One of the things that you said during the meeting is that you proposed some alternatives. I'm interested in what those alternatives you suggested were, if there's numerous, maybe just several.
Well, there was a couple that were brought up, and I might ask Jason Bryce to come up and talk because he was made one of the proposals. We specifically requested or asked them if they would entertain making the project half the size that it is in order to decrease the density. Mm-hmm. And stay with the same type of proposal. Well, that did not fit with their business plan. Okay. They could not make it work. I think part of Jason's proposal, and I don't want to take words out of your mouth, was that maybe consider townhomes, a grouping, or several different smaller groups of townhomes in this area. We've kind of pointed to the development at Founders Park as maybe a reference point for that type of project. We wanted the architecture to fit in with what's out there already, and I cite stone walls, I cite Hillsview Dental, I cite West River Periodontics, and the Shack Family Dental. They all have an alpine or a mountain type of architecture that fits very nicely with the mountain views and the gateway theme that we're trying to preserve in that corridor.
Okay, thank you, sir. Jason, did you want to add something to that?
Not necessarily.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Anything else?
Go ahead, sir.
No, I think that's all I had to say, but I just wanted to, we did make some proposals. We don't have anything specific. All we know is that this project, the enormity of it, will not fit well with what's out there now.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Durst. Thank you, sir. Vicki, before I ask Mr. Samuelson a question, just a reference to the one slide, because to me it's imprinting a very good visual. And I understand that the Black Hills Energy Building is built on a lower level. And when the height level comparing, when you compared it to the steeple, where does the four-story apartment building fit in that line?
So, noting that that steeple is probably the height of what the existing apartments are today, this is going to set 10 to 18 foot taller on the horizon than the existing apartments.
Thank you. And the other question that I have for you is that, again, the garages are not going to fit on Mount Rushmore Road.
It is definitely our recommendation that the backside of the garages not be what's visible along Mount Rushmore Road or any of the right-of-way. Okay. So certainly it would require redesign. We encourage garages. We see other developers provide garages, but not adjacent to the right-of-way.
Sure. And Mr. Samuelson, based on these other comments that I'm asking for clarification, was there anything that you wanted to add to that? Because you did point out that you did have a conversation, and I don't want it to get heated at all, because I think we're trying to, to move forward here.
Yeah, well, I mean, some of the comments that he I guess, reference as far as design. Cutting it in half, yes. I mean, we can't, the amount of price of the land, because of it, you know, there was a building on there. There was, which I didn't say, and I was looking for a picture of that to say that it did at one time block the views of the hills. So these are new views, but the design of the buildings, I guess, hasn't been fully determined, but the building that we put here is based off of a project that we just finished up in Sioux Falls, and it had brick, it had stone, it had shakes, it had, you know, multiple different textures and colors as far as terrain, or I mean as far as elevation looks. So we really couldn't, I guess, answer that. I mean, because that's pretty specific. There was a question about light pollution, which in my, again, I come back to the garages a little bit, would help eliminate that, because that would help block. We could put some lights on the garages in the parking lot and light it up a little bit more than putting up pole lights or something on the building shining out. So, but again, I couldn't necessarily commit anything to that, because we do have codes and stuff that we have to go through to be able to say. I didn't know how to answer that. I mean, other than we'll do our best. I mean, that's, but as far as elevation look, I mean, you know, we try to not, you know, cut up the building, cut up the looks by putting on the stone in different textures. So to kind of make it look like an attractive project to the Rapid City, and because we do only do Class A properties, and we have to meet certain underwriting, and that's and to be able to offer amenities that we offer, and that's where we have to get to this certain number of units, because all of our properties have on-site management and maintenance staff. I mean, a few of them are here, but they all they live on site, and to be able to justify or be able to do that, to be able to focus in on our tenants, that's what we have to hit a certain number of units for that. So.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Madam Chair, just speaking to that comment. So the plan development requirements for submittal, we are not able to secure elevations, what a structure is going to look like with the typical plan development, unless they ask for exceptions, such as reduction in setback or height. And that is why we did secure elevations from this applicant. So what was presented today, we were of the belief is what was going to be built. If that's not the case, then certainly your consideration of that height exception, there should be conversation securing the design of that building, because it would go to whether or not you could support that exception.
Thank you, Vicki. Next, I have Mick Klosny.
Well, Nancy, I did do some homework. This is the comprehensive plan, 2-side pages, so it's pretty good sized. As I said on the Planning and Zoning Commission, I try to use the comprehensive plan as a guide to pull me forward. And I'd ask the designers, the architects, the developers to do the same. We have a desire to have a beautification in our community. This is a gateway to the city. It's actually Mount Rushmore Road now. It's not Highway 16 anymore. It's a part of, I do sit on the Mount Rushmore Road group committee, and so there is some things here. As I read through, there's multiple spots that I looked on the comprehensive plan, page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, chapter 3, page 25, page 26, 109, 124, and I could go on and on and on. There is a lot of talk about the role of a comprehensive plan and establishing a long-term vision for the city of Rapid City. The purpose of that comprehensive plan is to advance that. Appearances in the entrances. It's important that this comprehensive plan be looked at. It's a guide to design the appearance of the community gateways and entrance corridors. There are many times that it's brought up. I feel that the size of this, the height, Bob, I was hoping that this meeting that you guys had would solve some of this. Last meeting, we talked and you guys were going to get together, and I would hope that the people in the community and the designers could get together and come up with a compromise that would work. That was my hope. It sounds like it did not happen, but I'm of the belief that this is not the place for this height. I believe that we need these kind of developments. If we go off of Catron Boulevard, there's apartments down below on both sides of Catron Boulevard that are below the skyline, that you can go either way. There was one that was not brought up that's further down toward Sheridan Lake Road, and it's right along, it's nestled nicely in the hillside. Nice apartments. There's places for these. I'm not a believer that this is the place. I think it takes away from our vistas. I think it takes away from the beauty of our hills. And I think, we are called the city, the Star of the West, the city of presidents. This is the road to Mount Rushmore, and I think we need to develop it as such. And yes, we need houses, we need things, and it's a great place to put houses between two schools. Amazing. I just don't know that this is the right thing. So I thank you, and I will be voting against this. So.
All right, Galen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess for me, it's hard to support the exception to get up to 4 stories. And I will kind of remind everybody in the commission here that that front parcel is general commercial. So basically, again, I think it's been stated right now, the property owner could pull a building permit, put a 4-story, 45-foot-high hotel there, and we couldn't do anything about it as long as it meets codes. So that's where they're at right now, is they can put a 45-foot commercial structure there. So we need to go down to office commercial so we can get residential in there. And I just don't like the idea of rezoning to office commercial, which has a 35-foot exception, and then allowing it back up to 45 or 48 in this case again. I mean, if we're going to do that, we might as well just bring it down to high-density residential or whatever we need to actually meet it, then we don't have to grant the exception. But I don't really like that plan either. So that's kind of where I'm at. I don't like the 4-story aspect. It just cuts away from the views too much. Also kind of want to drill into the logic of, locating this close to employment centers. There's been a lot of talk about how these 4-story or the other Samuelson apartments are desirable for the retirement community because they're all 4-story elevators or ADA. It fits that retirement need. Well, I guess what's the logic of having your retirees living close to your new employment centers? Wouldn't you want to target your residential areas close to employment centers for the working class or the people that are actually going to be working there? So for me, I don't really see a big need for this kind of property right here. If it comes in as a 3-story apartment complex as it's kind of laid out, I would support that, but I can't support it as it is right now.
Thank you. We've talked about a lot of issues, or you have, and we have up here. The one thing I'd like to point out is, that there is definitely going to be a traffic impact with this, but traffic problems can be solved. There'll be a traffic study. One thing that's probably going to happen, like it or not, is as development occurs out on Mount Rushmore Road in this location, speeds will have to be slowed down. Right now it's 60 miles an hour, which it's getting to the point where that's probably too fast for this area, but a traffic impact study would determine that. Signals, if there's needs for signals, all of that can be solved. So, I'm not really that concerned about the density based on the argument of traffic, because I think that all of that can be fixed. You know, and one thing we got to consider is that the character of this area is going to change. I mean, it's unfortunate that, you know, the residents here have enjoyed, you know, having this big open space out there. But, you know, there's been planning done. There's been, you know, they've taken consideration of the character of the area. We've got the comprehensive plan that, you know, identifies what should be happening there. And so, you know, unfortunately, residents are going to lose something there. You know, somebody said, you know, not in my backyard, and that's true. And I've said this with other items that we've had brought here, that, you know, if you knew that when you built those houses there that this was going to eventually develop into a commercial area or office, whatever. So I'm not, you know, concerned about, you know, the density and you know, I am concerned, you know, that you guys will lose your residential. But having said that, and others have brought it up, these decisions are going to have impacts for many years, and, you know, having a 4-story apartment complex right next to Mount Rushmore Road just doesn't seem like it's appropriate for the character of this property. I mean, we've granted exceptions with height, but those have been farther off the road. You've got 2 buildings right along Highway 16 that are going to be 4 stories. You know, I don't even have a problem with putting the garages right there. You know, although you know, it would take away a little bit of the character, but the 4-story, that's a huge one for me to overcome. You know, maybe there's a compromise here. You know, what about making the 2 buildings along Highway 16 3-story and leave the others as 4-story? You know, at least when I'm looking at this rendering that was done along the service road there with the 4-story apartment complex, and I think it would look a heck of a lot better if those units along there were 3-story. You wouldn't notice as much the 4-story ones in the back. So those are my comments, and we'll just see where this goes from here.
Thank you. Vicki?
Sorry, I didn't know I had my speaker button on. Let me turn that off.
I wasn't quite sure if you wanted to talk twice or not. Karen?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. To start with, I want to say that the apartments that Samuelson says built previously, I think are excellent looking apartments, and I know a lot of people who have desired to be in those apartments, and they're very nice. I happen to live off of Highway 16, so I travel this road every day, and I've watched, since I've lived there quite a few years, I've watched the whole area develop. And at first I was thinking to myself, well, I'm out in the country, you know, because I live farther out, and so it was so nice to just drive down a road and see nothing. And as the property started to develop, and my husband and I said, wow, this is going to really change. And it has changed tremendously over the last several years. But I've watched the change, and I've seen the properties develop, you know, the dentists and all these other different properties that have developed along the way, and they actually fit pretty good. And I've never thought that would be bad. I just said, well, this is nice, and as people drive up to Mount Rushmore and the tourists come through, they see our area and say, wow, this is a nice area. And I also look at the weather every day when I go by, because as I drive through, I can see the mountains, and I can see the hills, and I can see the clouds coming in, and I know whether it's going to be a great day or a cloudy day or a foggy day, and it just makes me feel like I'm still out in the country. And so that part of me I want it to remain that way if possible. I also understand business. I know that if you're going to build something, it has to maximize. Otherwise, why would you build it if you can't make money on it? So I understand from the perspective of a commercial building or an apartment building going in, what it takes to do that. The idea that this area needs more apartments, I don't disagree with that. As this area, this corridor develops more and more, there are going to be a lot of people working up there, and everybody wants to live close to where they work, saves on gas, and it's just, that's your community when you're working there and you're living there. When I looked at the perspective of what's going to happen with this area, and I looked at the buildings that were going to go in there, I took the Samuelson property that's currently there and placed it right there next to the road. And my first impression was, wow, that is huge. And coming in, as I've driven up Highway 16 and looked at this property, and it's kind of on a knoll, so it's higher than some of the properties. As you go down past that, it does lower, the land value is lower, the land topography lowers. And I thought, boy, right on the top of this hill, they're going to put those big apartments, 4-story, and it just, to me, it was, I think Nancy or somebody mentioned it's like a wall, and that's what I saw. I see that wall, and I just don't know that that is the appropriate spot for that size of development. I think that commercial development, as it's gone forward, and all the people who have built here and live in this community know that that's an excellent place to continue the development, and I know it's going to continue all the way down probably to past the hill, all the way down the hill. So, but it's the top hill that's there that I would like to see preserved. I think the view of this community is important, and I cannot support a 4-story apartment complex going right there. I think one of the other comments that were made about having an apartment for the workers is good, and maybe the 4-story with, as Galen mentioned, with the elevators, maybe isn't the right apartment complex to be in this area. So I'd like to see the zoning stay the same. I'd like to see the change in this. If there's going to be something different that can come forward, I'd be glad to look at something different. But what's proposed right now is not what I see. And I think there was a comment made about, if you live there, you know that it's going to change. Well, everybody knows that it's a possibility down the road. But look, for me, for instance, I live off of Highway 16, not right on Highway 16, but off the road. And I know what the zoning is around me. And I've told a lot of other people, when you go buy a piece of property, look at the zoning, look at what's going to happen in the future. Well, you've got a property next to these folks who, it's ag right now, which can change, but ag is right there. That's kind of a buffer. Then there's commercial. And they've built there knowing that that corridor is commercial. So they know that there's going to be changes that are going to happen. We're asking to say, to them, this is what you had today, but we're going to change it and let a large apartment complex go there. And that's a little different than, it's not the same as saying, I don't want this in my backyard. I think that folks would be amenable to something in their backyard if it wasn't quite this size of a piece of property. So my comments are that down the road, bring me another example, or find a piece of property that's farther south that's not quite on the top of this hill to do your apartments, or set it back farther from the road. And that's what I'd like to see. So I'm against the proposal as it stands. So thank you.
Okay, we have Mike Wasney again.
Those were some great comments. I would be remiss if I didn't say that the Samuelsons, I appreciate what you're trying to bring to the community. You've got a great design that you've got in mind. You've done some great work. I am not a big fan of the apartments on the hill. I think they could have been shorter. I think that they kind of stand up and take away some of the vista, so I'm not a big fan of those. But I think the properties that you build are great, and I think there's a need in our community for these, but I just don't have it down, as I said, on this spot. So I would be remiss, though, in not saying that we appreciate what you bring to the community as you develop properties. So I appreciate what you have there.
Okay, Galen.
Thank you. I'm going to get a motion on the floor, but before I do that, maybe a question for the applicant. There's been a lot of talk about bringing this down to 3 stories. If we make a motion that basically makes that, grants everything else, except we don't grant the exception to get up to 48 feet, is that even worth making, or is this a non-start at this point, I guess? Maybe if you want to make a comment on, and it's your option, you don't have to say anything about it if you don't want to at this time either. Again, recognizing that if it seems like this is going to, I don't want to look to the future, but if this fails as it is right now, you would have the option to appeal it to the city council either way. So.
Yeah. Well, obviously we kind of thought that this might be a possibility, obviously. So, I mean, we would entertain it. I mean, we've kind of expressed what we still would need to meet our, as far as somewhat our units to get close to. But as far as 3 stories, yeah, we would have to entertain that, I guess. So.
Okay.
So.
Well, I think we'll see how this goes. I'll make a motion here to approve items. What are my numbers here? 4, 5, and 6. 4, 5, and 6 together. Adjusting item 6's recommendations that we do not allow the exception up to 48 feet. So in other words, sticking with the as in code for office commercial, 35 feet is the total height. I'm sorry if that generates even more discussion here.
Second. Okay, so we have a motion by Galen, a second by John. Vicki, I just want to check with you on, the legal aspect of, well, not legal, but the parliamentary aspect of that. If the motion is to approve the rezone requests 4 and 5, and to also approve number 6, removing the height exception, this will still be in a planned development, as I understand it, and so we would then be able to, when it comes back to us, approve or deny anything over 3 stories if we so choose at that time. Is that correct?
That's correct. And Madam Chair, if I might just offer a friendly amendment to the motion maker. So if it's with your agreement, the motion is to approve the 2 rezoning applications, to deny the height exception from 4 stories and 48.4 feet, and remain with the 35 feet, 3-story maximum height of office commercial, and to approve the initial plan development with the balance of the stipulations identified in the project report.
Correct.
Is that does that sound good to John too? Okay, thank you. So we have a motion on the floor. I also have a light up still for Vince.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to, I think Kurt brought up some good points, and Mr. Samuelson, I couldn't appreciate more what you're doing here today. And as a matter of fact, it couldn't be more poignant when we're saying goodbye to our 41st president who signed the Americans with Disability Act. And one of the concerns that you had right away was to make sure that those who fall under the Americans with Disability Act would be able to get to an apartment that's on the 4th floor. So thank you for what you're doing.
Okay, I do have a couple of quick comments. First, for the applicant, I do have a question about that. I think obviously ADA compliance is extremely important, especially, if you require it to be limited so much by not having housing. You can put an elevator in a 3-story building, but is you know, a four-story building kind of the break-even point for developers generally, or is it a federal requirement that if there's 4 stories, there has to be an elevator? What is the difference between a 3-story and a 4-story with an elevator?
No, yeah, you're correct. I mean, you can put an elevator, yeah, in a 2-story, 3-story buildings. It ultimately is just the cost. I mean, it's there. I've seen elevator cost, I don't know, jump almost 50% from one project to another. That's only a couple years apart. So it just kind of.
Thank you. So we have a motion on the floor and a second. Do we have any more discussion? Mike?
One of the things that I heard the developer bring up, if we go to a 3-story, is that the walkways and some of the other things that they had designed into it might disappear. I guess I would challenge them a little bit to try to maintain some of those, especially in that area. And I guess that'd be more of a challenge to the developer as they bring the plan forward.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Vicki.
So as a part of the stipulations that are identified in the project report, the 400 square foot per unit of open space must be met, whether this is a 3-story or 4-story. The minimum amount of parking must be met. All setbacks must be met. And so when visiting with the developer, as we were reviewing this project, my encouragement was to work backwards. Find out how do you secure the open space, the setbacks, the parking, after Planning Commission determines the height, and then you'll know how many units fit. And until you get to that equation to work, you just don't know how many units can fit on the property.
And I think it's also important to note, you know, that sounds to me when I saw that on the report, like, well, if we can't get the 4 stories, we might end up taking out some trees. But this is going to be a planned development if it goes forward, and so we could always stipulate that the trees are going to remain. And so that's not really a concern of mine. I have Karen.
Thank you. I'm a little hesitant to approve this. I really appreciate the fact that we're lowering the apartments down to 3 stories instead of 4. But I don't want to see the development plan, you know, totally, but I would like to see something that shows me what you perceive to be able to do a 3-story apartment before I say, yeah, this is a great idea. So, and I think the neighbors would like to see that too, but I'm not opposed to the development in that area. I'm just not sure that I'm ready to vote for it yet. So, thank you.
You know, in looking at this, I'm wishing that there was some sort of intermediate step between an initial plan development and a final plan development, because just in this particular case, simply because a final plan development, I understand it's a rather large cost. So I'm not making a substitute motion, but I'm offering this because I can't as the chair. But I'm just pointing this out as maybe a potential solution, is to approve 4 and 5, deny the initial plan development, with the hopes that they could reapply.
Madam Chair, we strongly encourage you that if you're going to deny one, you deny all 3. I think that the property owner to date, this needs to be a joint project. They may find that the general commercial is the better zoning if this particular potential buyer doesn't come forward. So you will see on the rezoning applications, it's in conjunction with the initial plan development. Your choices would be to act on the initial with just as a concept. If anyone in the audience or anyone wants to appeal this, they will to council. I assume that's going to happen, so this item's going to go forward to council and be heard with the rezoning applications. Your other option would be to continue this item for a specific time and then allow the developer to bring back a new layout with 3 stories and what other amenities he may propose, like privacy fences, berm landscaping, or whatever, in order to meet the setback requirements, the open space, and still provide a buffer between them and the residential that exists in the area.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. So we do still have a motion on the floor. Unless there's any more discussion. Karen?
Thank you. I'm going to make a substitute motion. It might not pass, but I would like to make a substitute motion for this to continue for, I don't know how long it will take you folks to come up with another set of ideas. If it's 2 weeks or, well, it won't be 2 weeks, it'll be January. What's the first meeting in January, Vicki?
Our first meeting is January 10th.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to make a motion that we continue all 3 items till January 10th and see if that goes forward. So that's my motion.
Do we have a second? Okay, we still have a motion on the floor, and I don't see any more lights up. I think we should probably take a vote. So all those in favor of approving 4, 5, and 6 while removing the height exception with staff stipulations. Did I get everything in there? Okay, please say aye. All those opposed, say nay.
Aye.
Nay. Do we need a roll call?
Bowman? Caesar? Gallagher? Herr? Hogestrat? Hughes? Quasny? Vidal? I have a tied vote.
Madam Chair, Wade, if you'll confirm with a tied vote, the motion fails. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we're on to number 7.
Ms. Wade, could you clarify, please? Does that mean that all 3 items are, what does the failed motion mean?
So clarify with me, the motion was to approve with the exception of the height. We really should have some action on it. I think that probably either side is going to want to appeal, so.
So in the past, and Wade, jump in here if I'm wrong, when there's a motion to approve and we have a tie vote, the motion fails, which is the same as a vote to deny.
Correct. It can't pass without a majority, so I guess in that event it's deemed denied. So
hence why Rachel was going on to the next item.
If you don't have another motion that somebody wants to make to dispose of this item, then that's the action that will stand, is that this is all deemed denied.
And so in reminding the audience, anyone can appeal the initial plan development to City Council. The rezones are just a recommendation. Those go on to Council. So they will have that discussion at that point too.
Is that clear to everyone in the audience what's going on here?
Just a quick question. Will we be notified if an appeal has been filed? How will we know?
If an appeal is filed, then we have to publish the item and prepare it for council, which usually takes about a month. And then we would advise council to hold the rezones and consider them in conjunction with the appeal. So it would be about a month. Andrea, are letters sent on that? No.
How would we find out about that then, please?
So you would contact our department. The appeal needs to be in within 7 calendar days. So a week from today, by the end of the workday, if an appeal isn't in, then the action of the Planning Commission on the initial plan development is final. And so we encourage you, as we do with all plan developments, contact us and we will certainly make you available or provide you with the information if anyone has appealed it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Number 7.
Item number 7 is 18 PD 035, a major amendment to a plan development to expand the county detox and medical facility located at, Care Campus east of 4th Street between Kansas City and Quincy Street. In particular, the applicant's proposing to this major amendment to expand into the second floor, approximately finish 13,700 square feet for inpatient treatment program. Property is zoned public district. In addition to expanding the use inside the building, they're also proposing to construct 18 additional parking spaces. Aerial view showing the building used to be the old NAU campus. Currently, or the previous plan development approved additional parking on this lot, and then the applicant is proposing to construct 18 additional parking spaces on the opposite side. Future land use shows it as downtown, and as I said, it's located on the southeast corner of 4th and Kansas City, between Kansas City and Quincy Street, and across the street from the courthouse. When we saw this as a planned development for the Pennington County Care Campus previously, exceptions were granted to reduce the parking from 241 to 67. An exception to allow existing setbacks, reduce landscape islands, and reducing the required setback for a commercial parking lot from a residential district. As part of this application, since they're expanding the use, they need a new exception to reduce the parking from 296 to 85, and then as well to reduce the setback for a commercial parking lot from a residential district from 12 feet to 0 feet. Here we have the site plan showing the new parking which will be constructed. Between the lots is a existing single-family dwelling. County is working with them to purchase that and would continue to expand the parking lot. This is a higher density area with a lot of residential mixed in with parking and commercial. And so previously, when the exception was granted, it was with a screening fence between the parking lot and the single-family dwelling, which is also being proposed with this request, and staff is recommending to approve that exception. In addition, the parking reduction, it's a smaller percentage. The original exception was 72.2% reduction. This is a 71.3% reduction with a lot of on-street parking, the additional parking that they're providing, the unique operating plan of this facility, and the county parking ramp to the northeast. This was previously, an exception was granted, and staff is also recommending with this application that the exception to reduce the parking be granted. Here we have some floor plans of what's being proposed on that second floor. This is the fencing which will be put up between that residence and the parking lot. And then this is looking at the property from 4th Street and Kansas City, looking into the property, the existing building. Sign is posted, looking at the courthouse and other facilities operated by the county. And there you can see the parking garage in the far right-hand side. Looking at the opposite direction on Kansas City back towards downtown. And there is a lot of on-street parking in the area, residential to the west. Looking into that parking which was created, and this was taken about 10:30 on Tuesday, so you can see there is available parking. Looking along the alley to the east, And this is looking into the area which is on that east side of that single-family dwelling where the additional parking will be constructed, and looking on Quincy Street to the south at some residential in the area. Staff is recommending that the major amendment to the plan development to expand the boundaries of medical and detox facility be approved with the stipulations noted in the staff report. Are there any questions for staff? And the applicant's representatives are in the audience if there are any questions.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any questions. Mike?
That fence, where was it going to go?
Along that east side of the existing single-family dwelling. So let me. Along that property line. So on the west side, they're going to build additional parking here, and then the fence along that property line.
I guess the only concern I had was because of the what this is designed for. Putting fences up sometimes hides things that might go on, and so I guess that would be my only concern, is that maybe the people that need to see what's going on might not see, and that was my concern with a fence that is a privacy fence. That was the only thing I had. So.
Okay, I don't have any speaker request forms, and I don't see any other lights up. Okay. We have a motion by Kurt and a second by John H. To approve with staff stipulations. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, number 8.
Madam Chair, we'll need a motion to continue the meeting past 9 o'clock.
Oh, okay. Looking for a motion to continue past 9. Okay, we have a motion by Galen, second by Vince. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passed.
Item number 8 is a conditional use permit application to allow a car wash in the general commercial district. The applicant is proposing to construct a 1,500 square foot 2-tunnel service bay car wash in conjunction with a 5,500 square foot convenience store. The proposed development is part of a larger proposed development that includes a large retail superstore. But just to note, the superstore is going to be addressed as a separate building permit application, and the conditional use permit is specific to the car wash and the convenience store. The subject property is zoned general commercial district and is approximately 37.5 acres in size. This is an overview of the aerial of the property, noting its location between East Mall Drive and Interstate 90. The future land use for the property identifies it as mixed-use commercial, and on the city's major street plan, East Mall Drive is identified as a principal arterial street, and access to the proposed development will come from East Mall Drive. This is an overview of the site plan that was submitted with the application, noting again that the large development on the southwest side of the property, the superstore, is going to be addressed as a separate building permit application, and that today's conditional use application is for the C-store and car wash over here. And it's also worth noting that things like parking and landscape calculations were addressed for the entire site, for the entire development, not specific just to the conditional use for the car wash. As you can tell on the site plan, the convenience store and car wash are located on the northeast corner of the property, and the intended car wash service bays are on the south side of the convenience store, with the stacking spaces for the car wash provided here along the west side of the proposed development. This is a little closer view of the proposed convenience store and car wash, also showing the landscape for the development. If you note, the landscape island here on the west side extends on 3 sides of the proposed car wash and convenience store, shielding it from the rest of the development. These are the elevations that were submitted with the application, noting that the convenience store and car wash are approximately 20 feet high. Maximum allowed height in general commercial district would be 45 feet. This is an overview of the site plan showing circulation on the property, and again, showing how stacking spaces for the car wash will be provided on the west side of the convenience store. 8 stacking spaces are provided for each lane, which is in excess of the minimum requirement. As part of this application, the applicant is proposing to construct 3 on-premise signs. Planning Commission has directed staff that any time on-premise signage that includes LED signage is proposed as part of a conditional use permit, that it be brought before Planning Commission for special consideration. In particular, 2 of these signs contain an electronic reader board sign. The applicant is proposing signage on the northwest, the northeast, and the southeast corner of the property. On the northeast corner of the property, the applicant is proposing a 15-foot high monument sign with electronic display for fuel prices. On the southeast corner of the property, adjacent to Interstate 90, the applicant is proposing a 50-foot high monument sign that also includes an electronic reader board display. The maximum allowed on-premise height for a sign of this nature in general commercial district is 45 feet, so this is in excess of that height requirement. And then on the northwest side of the property, the corner, is a 30-foot high monument sign that also has an electronic reader board sign. In total, the applicant is proposing 326.5 square feet of LED signage. The maximum allowed LED signage is 60 square feet, so this is in excess of that. One of the stipulations in the project report is that all signage must comply with the Rapid City Municipal Code, or a variance must be obtained. If it's the applicant's intent to have 326.5 square feet of LED signage, a variance would have to be obtained, and approval of this conditional use permit for the car wash does not indicate approval of the dimensions of the signage that you see. I was able to visit the site, and this is the signage posted for the conditional use permit on the north side of the property. And this is a view back to the southeast showing the approximate footing for the development for the convenience store and car wash. This is a view looking west along East Mall Drive. And looking across Mall Drive to the north, northeast. And this is a view to the west showing the existing development, noting the Hilton Garden Inn Hotel that is to the right of the photo over here. And then finally, this is a view to the south across Interstate 90 showing existing development on the other side of the interstate. With that, staff would recommend approval of the conditional use permit to allow a car wash in the general commercial district with stipulations as noted in the project report. At this time, staff is available for questions, and I believe the applicant's consultant is also in the audience.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Vicki?
Just as a point of clarification, what's before you today is to allow a car wash in the general commercial district, and based on your instructions is to identify a reader board sign that's being proposed as a part of a conditional use on a property. Acknowledgement that yes, we concur with the car wash and its design, and yes, reader boards may be appropriate at this location, does not indicate concurrence of the size and dimensions that are proposed. That will come to you in a separate application as you sit as the Zoning Board of Adjustment, and you will make that determination at that time. I would like to point out that the electronic reader board signs in general commercial are allowed, and if they weren't asking for the car wash, it would just be getting a sign permit and potentially a variance to the size, but if they met the size, it would just be a sign permit. So just for clarification, if you do acknowledge, yeah, reader boards may be appropriate at this site, you're not confirming that you concur with the size and scope of the reader board.
Okay, thank you. We do not have any speaker request forms, and I don't see any lights up, so I would look for a motion. Okay, Mike G made a motion to approve. Mike Q seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And I was an aye, sorry. have item number 9, please.
Item number 9 is 18 PD 033, the final plan development to allow an oversized garage. This was continued from the November 8th Planning Commission meeting by the Planning Commission to allow the applicant to submit revised elevations and work with the neighborhood. On November 21st, the applicant requested that the item be continued to this meeting, and we have some revised elevations that have been submitted. And we've also received 6 letters which are linked to the item agenda online. Just to refresh, property zone Park Forest District, they're proposing a 3,068 square foot detached structure which includes a carport, a garage, and a greenhouse. Here we have an aerial view showing the existing single-family dwelling located on the property and access from Skyline Ranch Road. Future land use is, I believe, forest conservation, and showing where it's located in the city, west of Tower Road, which is identified as a collector street. This is a revised site plan. The applicant has moved, or is proposing to move the garage approximately 30 feet north, so moving it back away from Skyline Ranch Road approximately 30 feet. That's one of the revisions that's being proposed. This is the original elevation which was submitted. Planning Committee, there was a lot of discussion about adding rock and horizontal siding and making changes to this west elevation. And this is the proposal from the applicant showing the rock along this wall as well as along the exposed foundation, and then a second column which would be in keeping with what is shown, what is on the existing single or home on the property. And then the other revision is the horizontal siding, which would match the horizontal siding on the dwelling, and it'll match in colors. The one revision on that north side is that they're proposing to paint the exposed foundation to match the dwelling. Otherwise, it will be a greenhouse and roof being shown. So those are the revisions that are proposed. Again, looking at the house, you see the columns of red rock on either side of the windows, horizontal siding. So they're proposing on that west side only to have it match, noting that on the east side it'll be facing into the property and only they will see it, and on the north side it faces trees. And on the south side, moving it back 30 feet, there's that berm there. It will be dug into the ground so that not much foundation will be exposed, but they are proposing to move it back approximately 30 feet, so it's a little bit further back from the road. And again, looking at pictures in the area, a lot of open space, a lot of trees. I believe this one shows one of the contentions is that if they move it further north into the trees, it won't be visible from Skyline. So I mean, they are moving it to 30 feet, but just not all the way back. So this looks into the location of the proposed garage from the road, J.W. Gould Memorial. That was one of the exceptions that was requested, and why this was in a final plan development was to waive the requirement to pave the first 50 feet of the driveway, and J.W. Gould being gravel road, staff was recommending to grant that exception. And then this is looking at other oversized structures in the on the property to the west, and it is further north down the hill. So staff's recommendation is that if the Planning Commission determines that the proposed elevation revisions are appropriate, then the final plan development should be approved with the stipulations in the staff report, particularly stipulation number 5, saying that the proposed garage elevations on the west side shall include the red rock accents on the exposed foundation and 2 columns 30 inches in width of red rock accents, dark trim and doors to match the dwelling, and horizontal lap siding constructed of a fire-resistant material. In addition, the exposed foundation wall on the south side of the structure shall be painted to match the dwelling, and a minimum 265-foot front yard setback from the property line shall be maintained. With that, I believe there are some speaker request forms, but staff is available for any questions.
Thank you, Fletcher. I do have some speaker request forms. First one, Marnie Gold, if you could please state your name and your address.
Good morning. I'm Marnie Gould. My address is 1850 Skyline Ranch Road. I am the neighbor due west of this request, and I'm here to request that you deny the application. I did submit a letter to all of you with my opinions about the impact on our neighborhood. I believe that both myself and my husband and our neighbor on the other side of this property, due east of his property, we have all objected to the location primarily of this proposed oversized detached building, primarily because of the scope and the proportion of the proposal to the existing building. Additionally, because of the proximity to the road and how much of it you would see from the road. Whereas both of his neighbors, myself and the neighbor to the east, have detached storage buildings. Ours are placed much further to the north and also downhill topographically from our residential structures, so as to be out of sight to passersby on Skyline Ranch Road in our neighborhood. I don't think any of us want to object to the fact that he would like to build this structure. It's mostly where it's placed on his property and the proportion of it to the existing building. So I'm just here to reinforce my letter asking you to deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gould. Next we have Cliff Beanert.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was at this meeting on November 8th when the original discussion took place about the application, and I opposed it then and continue to oppose it. My wife and I live at 2150 Skyline Ranch Road. We pass this site daily, numerous times. We believe that it's unbecoming of the area, does not match the architectural characteristic of the area. It's very prominent and disproportionately, as Mrs. Gould pointed out, disproportionately represented in comparison to the house. There's been some window dressing placed onto the building to create some acceptance, and it really is window dressing. It's bigger. The issue is the bigness and the disproportionate and the unbecomingness to the neighborhood. If you'd like to place it somewhere that you can't see it as prominently, then we should entertain that. But at this point in time, I really ask that you do not support this. And I submitted a letter, my wife and I submitted a letter for the 21st meeting because we were unable to attend that meeting. And so you have that on record. I hope that you've read it. I'd be open to answer any questions that you would have on that letter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Beanert. Next we have Deb Beanert.
Good morning. My name is Deborah Beanert, and I live with him at 2150 Skyline Ranch Road. The objection is the size and the scope of the building. It is glass on the south side, so any architectural features that have been discussed here are not visible from Skyline Ranch Road. The south side faces Skyline Ranch Road, so the entire glass side is what we would see. So the rock and the siding that you're speaking to does face the Goulds, but in general, that is not what you're going to see, and it will not address the size and scope of the project. The second issue that comes up is Mr. Jensen has repeatedly referred to it as I want to build to put things like I had on my ranch, but he doesn't live on a ranch anymore. This is a residential area, and this building isn't appropriate for that community. So thank you for your attention. I request that you reject. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bienert. I have Jay Schultz on behalf of Don and Frankie Schultz, the Living Trust.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Jay Schultz. I'm appearing on behalf of my parents, Don and Frankie Schultz, who reside at 2109 Skyline Ranch Road. They're elderly. My dad's 88, my mom's 85. They don't leave their house. Neither one drives. So they wanted to be here, but they cannot. So I'm speaking in their behalf. They did submit a letter opposing the proposed project. And I just want to, I guess, reiterate some of those points, but expand on what's already been noted. I concur with Marnie Gould's statements and the Bienert's statements in opposition. My father is one of the original developers of the property up there with Joe and Barbara Butler back in the early 70s. It was meant to be an upscale residential development, and I think everybody could who lives there would know that they are upscale homes. There are no greenhouses by any landowner up there, which I think an enclosed greenhouse is more in the nature of a commercial venture. I know Mr. Jensen has expressed that he doesn't intend to sell his vegetables and fruits in the open market, but it is going to appear to everyone who travels that road that here's a commercial greenhouse. There's no bright lights or neon signs to indicate that, but it's sure going to look like that. There's no existing metal pole barns that have been constructed after the properties were all purchased by the landowners. There's been talk about the dimension of this proposed outbuilding. And we're not talking just an oversized garage, we're talking an outbuilding with an open carport. There is no open carports by any of the landowners in this residential neighborhood. So in terms of the character of the proposed structure, it in no manner or form conforms to what's currently up there in that neighborhood. In terms of dimension, I would offer that the first attachment to the updated application, I don't think fairly represents what this structure will measure when compared to the existing home that occupies or measures in total 1,812 square feet of living space. What is being proposed to be constructed is a metal pole barn that is 70% larger than the existing home. It's going to overtake and clearly overrun that current residential, the home. So again, I don't think the scale dimensions that are portrayed in the first attachment to the updated application fairly represent what this structure will look like or represent in appearance. So to suggest that a metal pole barn that is 70% larger than the existing home is something that conforms in any way or manner to the existing neighborhood up there in a prominent neighborhood that was developed specifically to be that is simply not in fitting, does not fit in any manner or form the existing neighborhood there in terms of building character, quality, or materials. So on behalf of my parents, Don and Frankie Schultz, and the record owner of the property, the Frankie Schultz Living Trust, we would oppose the project. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a quick, I guess, sort of technical question. I'm sorry, for staff. Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Sorry. Generally, when we're talking about comparing a garage to a house in square footage, are we talking about usable space, or are we generally comparing the building footprints?
It's typically footprint, because you'd have to have a pretty large living area in order to meet the second requirement, which is no greater than 30% of the gross floor area of the dwelling. So it would have to be quite a large house in order to exceed that 30%.
Okay, thank you. Did you have a comment, Vicki? Okay. So we have another speaker request from Bob Brandt.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to ask Fletcher, have you received any communication from the neighbor to the east, Jay White?
Yes.
And he's opposed to it?
Well, yes.
I'm sorry.
You need to go through the chair.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And just quickly identify yourself again. I know you've spoken.
Bob Brandt.
Thank you.
The property owner to the east did submit a letter which is attached to the item, and did state that with certain considerations he would be in support, but without having it right in front of me right now, I couldn't read that off to you.
The reason I asked, Madam Chair, is that Mr. White has not communicated anything other than approval to Mr. Jensen. Jay White has a large unattached metal structure behind his house, larger than the one we are proposing. So Mr. Schultz is wrong. There are numerous other outbuildings in this development, and bigger. The Gould property has a giant bright white shed. Yeah, it's been there a long time, but it's bright white. It doesn't fit in with the neighborhood at all. I believe we've changed the design on the west to match or to meet you guys' approval, what you were asked for at their last meeting. So we've actually added another rock column to make that west side look very presentable. We put the horizontal fire-resistant siding as Tim Billings requested. So the west side looks very nice. The greenhouse is sunk into the ground 4 feet. You're only going to see from the road, or standing right in front, you're only going to see 6 feet of glass on the south side. The rest is in the ground 3 feet, substantially lower than the main floor of the house. So I think we've modified it to meet the objections at our last meeting. So we hope you'd approve it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have no more speaker request forms, but I do have a comment. Galen?
Sure, thank you. And I thank Mr. Brandt for making those revisions. I think to me, it appears you've met everything that we asked of you guys from the previous meeting. And I tend to agree that, we do have barns and a big shed immediately to the west, albeit a little lower sunken in the ground and that sort of thing. But to say that you can't have a garage in this neighborhood doesn't meet the characters, I think that's wrong. There's examples of other garages that are next to it. So I would tend to support this, given that they've made the necessary agreements that are the changes to the appearance that we talked about last time. It's not, I don't think it's quite as prominent as what we make it out to be. So I will make a motion to approve this per staff recommendations, again acknowledging the changes from the initial submission.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion to approve from Galen, a second from John. I have two more lights up, so Mike Q.
There's a visual that was put in with a letter that shows the glass front. I'm assuming the 30-foot drop, it changes that a little bit. I don't know that that's the exact visual.
That was submitted as public comment. It's not from the applicant, so I don't have a link to it, but it doesn't take into account that they're moving it back 30 feet.
What is shown there on the drawing is it's right next to the building. Was it 30 foot back? Is that the accurate drawing of where that is going to be placed?
So when they submit for a building permit, this is the plan that they'll have to build off of if it gets approved.
So it was 30 foot further ahead?
It was, yeah, closer to
okay.
The front of the building.
Well, I think that they did a lot of what we asked them to do, and what I see out there is a lot of those oversized garages, so I think that they've tried to accomplish what we asked of them, so I would support the motion on the floor.
Okay, I have a light up from Vince.
Yeah, yes, I was just agreeing with Galen and Mike. And of course, yes, they did do some of the changes that we requested. One of the pictures that I saw that was presented was there was a camper that was exposed. It was just out in the open. The applicant wants to build this so that he can put a motorhome or trailers inside so that you don't have to look at those. So he is talking about beautifying the area as well. So I'm in support of the motion as well.
I'm not sure of the parliamentary procedure here, but John, do you have a question or a statement?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Vicki?
Perhaps the planning commissioner, to expedite this, could present a motion for consideration, and then you guys could vote on that motion.
Yeah, I think we currently have a motion on the floor
okay,
by
sorry.
Galen. No, that's okay, that's okay. So my comments, I can't make now.
No, you have to vote on whether or not you want to call the question.
Oh, okay, so we need a second on the calling of the question? Second. Okay. All those in favor of calling the question? Nay. All right. So then we're moving on to the motion on the floor, which is to approve with staff stipulations. We have a motion by Galen, a second by John. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Nay. It passes.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
If I might, just for those in the audience, the Planning Commission's action on this conditional use permit is final unless it is appealed within 7 calendar days. If it isn't appealed, then it will go on to council, and that takes about a month to get on the council agenda.
Thank you for covering that, Vicki. Next, I think that was it. Do we have any discussion items?
We sure do. We'd like to wish you folks a happy holiday. This is our last meeting of the year. We appreciate all that you bring to the dais. We've put some hard ones on your shoulders today, and as usual, you vetted them beautifully, and I know we ask of you to make some hard decisions. To celebrate the holidays, we brought some caramel rolls. We hope that you stop and help yourself to one on the way out, and happy holidays.
Thank you. Happy holidays to you too. All right. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All right. See you guys next year.